The survival dome hissed as the drop pod disengaged, its stabilizers retracting with a mechanical sigh. A gust of alien air flooded inside, warm, humid, thick with the scent of sulfur and something floral. Mason Briggs cracked his neck, stretched like a man waking up on a weekend, and stepped out. The biome around him teemed with unnatural life, twisted trees with purple leaves, bubbling ponds of greenish fluid, and vines that pulsed like breathing muscles. A sky of shifting orange clouds rolled overhead, two suns cutting diagonal shadows across the red ground. The heat shimmered, and in the distance, something howled. "Nice ambience," Mason muttered. "Could use a hammock." Far above, in the sleek observation deck of the Galactic Unity Core, Commander Veltar observed through a floating hologram. Subject 049A, Homo sapiens. "Begin Phase 1, he said flatly. The monitors flickered. Heart rate, stable. Core temp, optimal. Neural patterns, irregular. "Why is he smiling?" one of the junior observers asked. "He believes he is winning," Veltar replied. "Let the simulation correct him." Down below, Mason set his survival pack on a rock, crouched, and unzipped it. Standard issue rations. Basic tool set. One emergency flare. A water canister. He clicked his tongue. No cheese. Rude. He stood and scanned the terrain. The core had made it tough, limited resources, unpredictable hazards, alien wildlife. Most cadets would start digging a pit or hiding under thick foliage to preserve body heat. Mason didn't. He found a patch of high ground near a rock outcrop and dragged over a few large stones. Tapping them with a multi-tool, he smiled as one rang hollow. Volcanic, porous, heat-retentive. Perfect. Then he started stacking. Inside the control room, a warning chimed. "Commander," the assistant said, "subject is constructing something, circular. Not a shelter. No defensive posture. He's arranging stones." Zoom in. The screen focused. Mason was layering rocks in an arch, occasionally stepping back to admire his work. Veltar's eyes narrowed. "That's not survival behavior." "No, sir," said the assistant. "It looks like he's building a furnace." "He's improvising," another voice said, hesitant. "That is, technically adaptive." Veltar stiffened. "No. He's mocking the test." Meanwhile, Mason had gathered a clump of fibrous moss from under a tree root and twisted it like rope. He struck flint to steel, twice, thrice, and coaxed a tiny flame into being, feeding it carefully with bark shavings. Fire caught. He grinned. "There we go. Step 1, fire. Step 2, culinary conquest." He pulled a flat panel of metal from his drop pod. It had once been the floor plate. Now, it would be a baking tray. To most, this was madness. To Mason, it was Tuesday. Back in orbit, the other cadets watching via livestream couldn't look away. "Does he not fear the jungle creatures?" a Lorathi observer asked. "No. He should," Veltar snapped. The assistant tapped her screen. Heart rate still steady. And, he's humming. Mason was, in fact, humming a Sinatra tune as he pulverized moss paste in a carved-out stone bowl. He added water, stirred, added alien grain from a spiny pod he cracked open with his boot. The result was a sticky, greenish dough. He glanced at the drone floating nearby and winked. "You're gonna want a close-up for this." The drone tilted as if confused. Mason laid the dough flat on a heated rock near the flame. It bubbled at the edges. He ladled moss paste over it like tomato sauce. A few shavings from a yellow fungus he'd taste-tested earlier went on top. It smelled faintly like Parmesan. He stood back, wiped his hands on his pants, and let the heat do the rest. Inside the command deck, silence fell. "I don't understand," a cadet said. "He's cooking," said another. "No," Veltar said slowly, as if the words were poison. "He's performing." On screen, Mason leaned against a rock, eyes half-lidded. "You know," he said aloud, "I ran jungle drills in Burma, survived on glaciers in Antarctica, and once made stew out of snow hare and cough syrup during a blizzard. But this?" He gestured to the dome. "This might be my favorite yet. 2 suns, breathable air, and fungus that tastes like cheese. I could write a cookbook." He took a bite of his proto-pizza. His eyes closed. He smiled. "Needs basil," he murmured. An alarm chirped. "Commander," the assistant said, stunned, "the subject has reached psychological equilibrium in record time." Veltar clenched a fist. "That's impossible. He should be under duress. He appears to be enjoying himself." Mason stared into the drone's lens again. "I give this simulation 5 stars. Would survive again." "Cut the feed," Veltar barked. "But..." "I said cut it." The screen went black. Mason didn't know what part of his performance ticked off the aliens the most, the fact he wasn't afraid, the fact he wasn't hiding, or the fact he was eating better than half the cadets in orbit. Didn't matter. He reached into his pack and pulled out a strip of dehydrated protein, tore it, and sprinkled it over the now golden pie. Alien pepperoni. Close enough. The dome's internal lights dimmed slightly, a simulated dusk. He wrapped a large leaf around the hot slice, took another bite, and whispered, "Tomorrow, we try dessert." The smell was spreading. Not through the dome alone, but beyond. Tiny particulate sensors along the outer hull of the survival chamber picked it up, carried it to the ventilation monitors. Biological analyzers pinged uncertainly. Non-toxic. Nutrient-dense. Highly aromatic. Emotional impact rating, positive. Inside Observation Room 12, Veltar stared at the data readout like it had personally insulted him. "He weaponized the environment," he muttered. "He seasoned it," one of the younger cadets corrected. Veltar turned slowly. "Do you find this amusing, Cadet Vren?" There was an awkward silence. Cadet Vren looked like he wanted to crawl into a black hole. The others kept their gazes locked on the main screen, where the human was crouched next to his oven, whistling while he added another layer of stone. Mason wiped his brow and stood back, examining the dome-shaped oven he'd assembled. It was rough, sure, but structurally sound, thanks to a bit of instinct, 2 years of outside camping, and watching one too many medieval cooking videos. He tossed another moss-wrapped stone onto the fire. The heat shimmered visibly now. His makeshift crust was holding up. He flipped it gently with the edge of his scrap metal spatula. Behind him, something growled. He froze. No movement. Not yet. The sound came again, closer this time. Wet. Breathy. Predatory. Mason turned slowly, hand inching toward a sharp-edged stick he'd carved earlier. A shadow shifted just beyond the ring of firelight. Glowing eyes blinked once. Then again. He crouched, squinting into the underbrush. "Hey, buddy," he said calmly. "I'm gonna guess you're either hungry, or just very curious about my crust." A quadrupedal creature emerged, a low, muscular beast with bristled fur, spiked shoulders, and a snout full of needle-like teeth. It sniffed the air, gaze fixed on the pizza. Mason sighed. "Can't say I blame you." Up in orbit, red alerts lit the board. Xyrelian predator inside the dome perimeter, a technician called. "That's a test breach. Override protocols," Veltar ordered. "Deploy deterrent gas." "Wait," Cadet Vren interrupted, pointing at the screen. He's not panicking. Mason didn't move. The creature edged closer, head low. One paw stepped over the fire line. Then Mason flung a piece of crust toward it. The beast paused. Sniffed the bread. Gently took it in its jaws, and chewed. Its ears twitched. It sat. Not bad, huh? Mason muttered. I call it alien garlic bread. He lowered the stick. The beast made a low chuffing sound, then curled up next to the warm rocks. Mason sat too, the fire between them. I'll call you Fluffy. You've got to be kidding me, one observer breathed. He tamed it, another whispered. He fed it, corrected Cadet Vren. Same strategy ancient Earth tribes used to domesticate wolves. Absurd, Veltar growled. This is not survival. This is manipulation. Subversion. Chaos. It's adaptation, said the assistant softly. Mason leaned back and looked at the sky, orange clouds giving way to deeper violet. Both suns were sinking. Soon it'd be cold. He glanced at Fluffy, who was already snoring. Right, he murmured. Insulation. He tore open the emergency blanket from his pack, layered it over the back of his lean-to, and lined the underside with warm moss. It wasn't pretty, but it'd trap heat. He banked the fire, pushed a few coals under the stone oven dome to maintain core warmth, and curled up near it. But just before sleep took him, the air thinned. His lungs tugged harder. Pressure drop. Nice try, he whispered to the dome. Manual override? He rolled to his knees, checked the small valve control on his drop pod's scrap hull. A low hiss greeted him, breathable reserves leaking. Too slow to kill him, too subtle for most to notice. Sabotage, huh? Mason smirked. From his pack, he pulled the sealed emergency water canister, cracked it just enough to release a pressurized steam puff, and placed it directly above the flame. As it vaporized, he positioned a rock funnel above the oven's output, redirecting hot air and the mist toward his bedding zone. Not ideal, but it bought him a few more hours. Try harder, aliens, he whispered as he drifted off. By morning, Fluffy was gone, the oven was still warm, and the crust was perfectly crisp. Mason rose, stretched, and checked the fermentation bowl. Beautiful, he muttered. The dough had risen. He scooped up a ball and patted it flat. He'd found more of the yellow fungus, savory, tangy, faintly cheesy. And he'd crushed 3 new kinds of glowing fruit to make a tart glaze. He layered everything, placed it on the hot stone, and covered it with a large curved scrap as a lid. 15 minutes later, he pulled it out. Golden. Crisp. Aromatic. He took a bite. Oh, that's dangerous. Above, Veltar's jaw clenched so tightly his exoskeletal plates clicked. He's succeeding. Correct, the assistant said. He's not afraid. Correct. He's undermining the core tenets of our training program. Also correct. More importantly, feeds across other cadet ships had picked up the footage. Alien recruits from across the galaxy watched in disbelief as the human broke every rule of the test, and thrived. Some laughed. Others shared the link. A few began asking questions. If survival can include happiness. If adaptability includes emotional regulation. If creativity improves outcome. Veltar paced. End the test. Shut it down. Contain the human. But the order never made it past command. A message blinked on the screen. From High Command. Continue monitoring. Do not interfere. We are curious. Mason cleaned his hands on a moss cloth and looked up at the drone still hovering. Didn't think it'd survive the night, huh, he said. The drone tilted slightly. I get it, Mason said. You don't understand. You see chaos. Unpredictability. But here's the thing, humans were born in chaos. We don't adapt because we're weak. We adapt because the universe never gave us another option. He sat back, watching the dome sky begin to shift again. One more day, he said. Let's see what dessert looks like. The oven was glowing. Not just warm, glowing. Radiant red, volcanic, steady. Mason watched it hum with life as the second sun crested over the horizon. The crust bubbled softly on the hot stone, releasing steam and a scent that even he couldn't describe. Earth didn't have a word for it. He turned to the camera drone and grinned. Dessert's almost done. I call it Xyrelian lava tart. Don't ask what's in it, you don't want to know how I figured that out. Orbit side, the observation deck was dead quiet. Dozens of alien cadets stared at the display, transfixed. A few leaned forward without realizing. One even drooled, though it may have been a glandular reaction. Only Commander Veltar stood apart, unmoved. He'd barely slept, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. This ends now, he growled. Initiate containment. His assistant flinched. Sir, the directive from High Command. Override it. I'm invoking Protocol Sen 14, in-test interference due to doctrinal subversion. The assistant hesitated. That protocol's never been used. Because until now, Veltar hissed, no one's ever turned a survival test into a picnic. Down in the dome, Mason didn't notice the pressure shift. Or the way the lights flickered, then dimmed. But he did notice the oven flame shrink by half. He crouched and narrowed his eyes. Interesting. He tapped the side of the dome, listened to the echo. They're interfering again. Must really hate good food. Behind him, the dome's outer hatch unsealed with a sharp hiss. Mason stood up slowly, turning toward the silhouette stepping through the pressure lock. Sleek black uniform. Sharp angular features. Mandibles twitching with disgust. Veltar had entered the dome. You're not supposed to be here, Mason said calmly. You're not supposed to be winning, Veltar replied coldly. Mason raised an eyebrow. Is that what this is now? A contest? The commander's eyes burned. This was designed to test survival. Endurance. Logic. You've turned it into a game. Survival is a game, Mason said. You win by not dying. I'm just playing it better. Veltar stepped closer, sneering. You have made a mockery of every discipline we've instilled across the Corps. You danced when you should have feared. You tamed a predator. He gestured at the oven, eyes twitching, you cooked. Mason nodded. Yeah. That's kind of what humans do. You drop us in a desert, we build irrigation. Put us in a cave, we draw on the walls. Put us in a survival dome? He waved toward the oven. We make breakfast. Veltar's voice turned sharp. You think your frivolity proves superiority? No, Mason said. I think it proves resilience. The dome was hot now. Not from the oven. From tension. The oven cracked softly as the tart finished baking. Mason stepped past the alien commander and lifted the lid. Steam curled up like incense. He slid the tart onto a stone plate. Then, without a word, he tore a slice, placed it on a flat leaf, and held it out. Try it. Veltar stared like Mason had offered poison. It won't kill you, Mason said. That's kind of the whole point. Long silence. Behind the drone, alien cadets watching from orbit leaned closer to their screens. Veltar slowly reached out. Took the slice. Raised it to his mouth. Paused. Bit. The silence broke only by a single crunch. Then, nothing. No expression. No twitch. Just analysis. Mason folded his arms. Well? Another pause. Then. Efficient. Mason laughed. That's alien for delicious, right? Veltar's eyes narrowed. It is, complex. Nutritionally sound. Flavorful. Unexpectedly, calming. Flavor's a survival tool too, Mason said. Keeps you going when the world's falling apart. A light pinged inside the dome. New message from the core. Test successful. Human adaptability recorded. Emotional response measured. Innovation acknowledged. Another ping. Subject 049A is hereby certified, advanced class survivalist. Mason blinked. That's it? Veltar looked away. Another ping. Subject 049A invited to instruct next Unity Core training cycle, Adaptive Field Tactics. Now that stunned Veltar. You're being elevated, he whispered. From chaos? From creativity, Mason corrected. From being the one species too stupid to quit. Hours later, Mason walked out of the dome. Veltar did not follow. Alien cadets watched in silence as the humans stepped onto the extraction pad, arms crossed, a burnt leaf tucked into his belt like a napkin. The dropship lifted off. Inside the dome, the oven still burned gently. Left untouched. A new sign was later installed beside it. Unity Core, Biome Dome Delta. Survival Zone, Psychological and Culinary Innovation approved. Founding participant, Mason Briggs, human. Codename, the Pizza Protocol. On the Unity Core station, Mason walked into the mess hall, still dusted in ash and moss, to the sound of hushed whispers. An alien cadet approached him cautiously. You made peace with a predator? Mason shrugged. Fed it crust. Another cadet stepped forward. Will you teach us? Mason leaned back against the table, smirked, and looked up at the screen broadcasting survival stats. Sure, he said. But first, you'll need aprons. The doors to lecture hall beta hissed open. 100 alien eyes turned. Mason Briggs stepped in wearing a grease-streaked apron, utility boots, and a smirk that refused to die. Behind him rolled a cart made from repurposed drone parts, stacked with alien fruits, wild grains, and a still-warm stone plate covered in something that smelled too good to belong in a military training facility. Silence. Mason clapped once. All right, cadets. Welcome to Adaptive Field Tactics 101, also known unofficially as How to Stay Alive and Eat Well While the Universe Tries to Kill You. A Lorathi student raised a spined hand. Sir, is this a cooking class? Mason grinned. No. It's a survival class. You just don't realize yet how much overlap there is between the two. The cadets blinked in unison. One scribbled furiously on a datapad. Survival equals food? The Unity Core hadn't known what to do with Mason after the dome incident. He hadn't just passed their most rigorous test, he'd redefined it. So, they did the only thing they could, made him an instructor and hoped it wouldn't turn into a rebellion. It almost did. Mason paced the front of the room, waving a flat, leaf-wrapped slice of yesterday's tart like a pointer. You've been trained to think survival is quiet. Still. Emotionless. Logical. You sit, wait, ration, repeat. But you're not machines. You're living, breathing species with instincts that go beyond math and muscle. He tapped the table. In chaos, what matters isn't how well you follow a manual. It's how fast you improvise when the manual burns. A Baran cadet, all ridges and stoicism, raised a hand. Our species does not improvise. That's why your species got stuck in a swamp test for 6 days chewing mud, Mason replied without missing a beat. Laughter. The Baran didn't smile, but noted the point. After class, Mason sat on the edge of his desk, wiping his hands on a moss cloth. The smell of fire-grilled root and roasted fruit lingered in the air. No one had expected him to end the session by making them earn their rations through teamwork and instinct. One group made a fire using reflective armor shards. Another crushed alien berries using boot pressure and wrapped them in steam-heated fungus wrap. One shy cadet, small, feathered, and almost silent, had managed to catch a scare lizard using just a vine and patience. Mason had nodded. That's it. That's survival. Not hoarding. Creating. Cadet Vren lingered behind. Sir, permission to speak? You just did, Vren. The young alien fidgeted. You changed the doctrine. Some don't like it. They say you're unraveling tradition. Mason leaned forward. You want to know a secret, cadet? Vren nodded. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. And half of them wouldn't have lasted an hour in that dome. Up in the Corps' executive level, the High Command watched the stream. This teaching style, one admiral said cautiously. Unregulated. Unorthodox. But effective, another countered. Veltar sat silently. Observing. Measuring. His defeat had not been loud, it had been humbling. And yet, he still attended every class. Watched every session. Plotted silently. On the 3rd day of instruction, Mason rolled in another cart, this one loaded with raw materials, a fire bowl, and a curious-looking creature in a containment orb. The cadets leaned forward as he uncovered it. This, he said, is a Xyrelian sting tooth. Fast. Toxic. Aggressive. Not friendly. But... He reached inside, undid the latch, and let it scurry onto the table. Gasps. A few cadets stood instinctively. Veltar, watching remotely, leaned in. But, Mason repeated, holding out a small strip of crust. The creature paused. Sniffed. Ate. Then lay flat, belly full. You can't always win by force, Mason said. Sometimes, survival is diplomacy. Sometimes, it's food. Cadet Vren whispered to the Baran beside him. He pacified a predator, with a snack. Mason pointed a finger at Vren without looking. Exactly. That night, Mason sat alone in his quarters. He stared at a small metal plaque on the wall, Unity Corps Instructor, Briggs, M. He wasn't sure if it was real yet. Then the door chimed. Come in, he said. Veltar stepped through. Alone. Mason didn't stand. Commander. I was not dismissed, Veltar said. You weren't invited either. Silence. Then Veltar moved to the table, placed something down. It was a moss-wrapped tart. Not Mason's. A new one. Rough. Burnt edges. Imperfect. But clearly an attempt. You made this? Mason asked. Veltar gave a curt nod. I attempted your method. In Simulation Dome 8. Mason took a bite. Chewed. Blinked. Not bad. Not good, Veltar corrected. No. But not bad. Another pause. Why? Mason asked. Veltar's mandibles twitched. Because your students are outperforming mine. Because the metrics favor your chaos. Because... I do not understand it. Mason leaned back. Understanding's not required. Just try not to ruin it. Veltar nodded once. I will observe further. He left. 2 weeks later, new recruits arrived for the next cycle. One by one, cadets entered the revised survival dome. No tools. No guides. No rations. Just instincts, and one rule: build. Don't just survive. Inside the dome, they found a wall engraved with Mason's words. Survival isn't silence. It's fire. Flavor. And the refusal to die boring. Briggs, M.